Alright, here we go, painting up some Plastic Soldier Company 15mm tanks. And I had a free weekend and I just wanted to build and paint something really fast, and so I pulled these out of the big miniature box. And we've already assembled, primered, and with the airbrush I base coated them with some Vallejo Model Color Brown Violet. And now we're doing the highlight stage, and that's done by mixing in some Vallejo Green Ochre with the Brown Violet. And we're giving it a very heavy dry brush with a about a 1/4 inch brush. And then step 2 is another lighter dry brush, this time with more green ochre mixed in. You can see on the palette there, it's almost pure green ochre. And that's the only 2 highlights I put on the tank. Again, I was just going for something fast. Didn't really have a huge plan going into it. I just wanted to get something done. So I could have done another step, gone a little bit higher, lighter in the highlights, but since I wanted to weather it quite a lot, I decided just to stop right here. Once that was done, I took the tanks back to the airbrush booth and sprayed a little bit of Vallejo Model Color khaki onto the lower portions of the tank for a dusty effect. And then back at the desk, I then went over those dusted areas with the same mix I used before, some brown violet mixed with green ochre. And I did that so the dust is just in the recesses, and the raised areas would be the normal paint color as the dust would get wiped off. Next, it's time to start painting some of the details on the tank, and starting with the tracks. And I like to add color wherever possible to my tanks, and so I'm using Panzer Aces Dark Rust here, which is the tiny amount of Panzer Aces Light Rust mixed in. And we're going all over the tracks. The tracks on the Stuart are metal with rubber inserts, and I really like painting these brown instead of steel because it adds some color to the tank, and tracks wouldn't be this rusty, but by the time we're done it'll be more dirt covered and it'll blend in nicely. For the rubber road wheels, I'm using black mixed with a little bit of German Grey, and there's different directions you can go with this. You could paint them a lighter color, they'd pick up a lot of dust because of the rubber, but again, I do like a lot of try to put different colors into the tank wherever possible, just to add more variety so everything's not just green and or brown. I also decided to pick out the rubber inserts on the tracks with the same color. Normally I wouldn't do this based on the assumption that I know everything's going to be covered in dirt and what have you, but I decided to try it for once and see if it would come out at the end. The ends of the treads and the edges of the road wheels I'm picking out with some Panzer Aces Light Rust mixed with just a tiny small amount of dark rust. And this is another artist interpretation here. Again, I like to put as much color as I could possibly work into a tank, and that overrules realism. A working tank would not get this rusty in the field, or this rust to be covered by dirt, but any excuse I could come up with to add more color into the scheme, the more colors the better. The wooden handles on the tools are picked out with some Model Color Flat Brown, and the metal parts of the tools gets painted with German Grey. I almost never use actual metallics on 15mm miniatures because I just don't think that at that scale you're going to have that bright metal sheen on an item when it's so tiny. So a non-metallic German Grey is completely fine, I believe. We're done with the painting portion now, and so the tank was airbrushed with 2 coats of Pledge Multi-Surface Floor Care, or Future Floor Polish as us old-timers call it. and it's an acrylic gloss coating for floors, but very useful in modeling, as I've mentioned it repeatedly. And now we're applying decals, and the decals are from I-94, and they have a wide variety, and they're very good quality. The decals are then allowed to dry for about 2 hours, and I applied 2 more coats of the pledge, one by hand over the decals, and then airbrushed another coat over the entire tank to really blend them into the surface. And now we're on to the weathering stage, and we're covering the entire tank with MIG's Dark Wash. It's an enamel wash, very good for picking out all those seam lines and highlighting all the details, and it's just very quick and dirty. You just slather it on. Actually, I think I slathered a bit too much on here because it did take a while to dry. But just apply it with an old brush and let it dry, and then we could move on to the next step. I almost forgot this part. While the dark wash was still wet, I then went over in a few spots with some MIG's Brown Wash, and not over everything, mainly just concentrating on the treads. And I've used these 2 washes before, but not mixing them or using them at the same time as I am here. But I wanted to give it a shot and see if it would work using both at the same time, rather than letting the tank dry and then applying a second coat. But mixing them did work out, and it was a bit faster. So after a couple hours, the wash will be dry. Mine took about 5 or 6 because I was a little bit too heavy-handed with it. But anyway, at that point, we can then move on the next step, which is remove the wash from the raised surfaces. And we do that just with a standard cotton swab and rub the tank down. And this will leave the wash in all the recesses and areas where we want shading. So it's a real quick way to get some contrast and some dirt into your tanks. I did want a heavy weathered tank, something that's been in use for a while. So now I'm going around with some AK Interactive rust streaks and applying some rust here and there, mainly concentrated on the lower half around the road wheels, but just placing it wherever I want to add a bit more color, where I think dirt or rust might collect. Mainly I'm using this as a dirt wash, not necessarily rust, but it's just to add some color to it and give it the idea of it's been through a bit more wear and tear. And like with the MIGs washed, after that comes the wiping off portion. And I'm not wiping off as much as I did with the MIGs wash, because this is more of shaping the color into the areas where I want it instead of just wiping it all off. So on the sides of the tank, if you do up and down, that gives you a good streak look. And I got a bunch of colors from AK Interactive. I can repeat this on using different shades to add more variety to the tank, but I actually only did this twice, once with the rust and then once again with the streaking grime, I believe it's called, and it just adds more variety and a bit more spice to it. But I didn't want to add too many because this is supposed to be just a weekend project, and I don't want to spend a week on these. One of the last things to do is to make some antennas for the tanks, and this is 20-pound test fishing line or leader line. And you could argue that this would be better done at the beginning before we started all this, but I'm always worried that applying too many layers of paint to the flexible fishing line, it may cause cracks in the paint as the fishing line gets moved around. Since it's flexible, it may not, but that's my worry, and that's why I usually do it at the end. But anyway, just pull out some fishing line, cut it into appropriate lengths, and I usually go for what would be roughly equivalent of about 10 feet. A little bit, that might be a little excessive, but I like the height on the tanks. And then all we have to do is drill a tiny hole wherever the antenna is supposed to go. put a little drop of super glue on the fishing line and insert, and we're done. And the natural curve of the fishing line, I always try to make it so that that curve follows the tank in a seemingly logical direction. So curve it towards the back, so to give the idea that the tank is actually moving forward. But once it's dry, a little bit of black paint, give the whole thing a couple coats of Testors lusterless flat or dull coat, and we're done. I said we were done, but I forgot about my favorite stage, which is the graphite stage. I have a little jar of graphite, which was graphite sticks that I ground down, and just get a little bit on your finger and rub some areas of the tank, just the edges mostly, and that gives the look that the paint has been worn away, mainly from the crew climbing in and out of the tank. And I really like doing this, and I do it way too much. I kind of go overboard with it, but I just like the look because it has a slight metallic sheen, like the paint has been buffed away. And I did want a fairly heavily weathered tank, so it works pretty well in this situation. But with that, now we are done. And we have our finished tanks. Just 2 here, that's all I can get on my little turntable, but there are 5 completed. And the goal was 2 days. Unfortunately, I took 3. Mainly that was due to drying times from the enamel wash. I was a bit heavy-handed with the MIG's enamel wash. If I was a bit lighter with it, I could have been done in 2 days, but I put it on too thick, and so it took several hours to dry. But at least it's a completed project. They're looking pretty... they've been through hell and back, as it were, and it's one more kit out of the collection, and that can go into the display case or hopefully on the gaming table. Thanks for watching.